Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to bring you another Agents of Transformation interview, this time with Gillian Bergamo. And I'm going to tell you how I met her in just a moment. But Gillian was conceived in Switzerland, grew up in Atlanta, and at the age of 12 years old, she knew that she would be living in England. And sure enough, I'll let her tell us about that. She did move to England and then back to the United States. And along the way, Gillian has worked with horses, dogs, and cats and developed a way of communicating that I would call interspecies connection and communication. And that's what Gillian is here to talk to us about, specifically about a very sacred relationship she had with a wild bird named Niko. So, welcome, Gillian. I so appreciate you being willing to share your story. And I just want to presence that I met you it was during the pandemic, it was 2021, when I was co-facilitating an online grief retreat with my dear friend, our mutual friend, Joyce Dillon. And Joyce had told me that you had an incredible story. And when you shared it in our grief retreat, I was very, very moved. And so I've been looking forward to this interview for quite a while. And I really appreciate your willingness to come and share your lived experience with my community. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Melody. It's lovely to be here, and thank you for just your sensitivity and seeing that this, and I have to say, it is a truly special story about Niko. And he brought so much into my life, so unexpectedly. And it was a development of relationship throughout. There was this expansion and growth that happened. And I have to say, he was pretty much the leader in much of it. I felt that he was the initiator for many parts of our daily routines, which became daily routines.
Well, let's start back. Let's start back when you were 12 years old and you had this strong impression that you would be living in England. And maybe this whole experience was to, get you to really trust your intuition. Because in your relationship with Niko, your intuition, your connection inside yourself was a big part of the relationship, trusting what was coming to you. But did you know anyone in England when you had this impression at the age of 12 that you were going to be moved?
No, no, not at all. No, this was just completely a knowing and a trusting in that knowing, and always keeping it somewhere in a place that felt it was close to my heart. And just, at the age of 12, you're not thinking in these terms so much. It's just like, I'm going. I know I'm going. And
And when
oh,
did you go to England? How old were you?
I was 20. I just turned 20, so still very young and very naive, never had been to Europe, so, and so it was just following this call, this pull, and I just let things unfold as they unfolded. It was really quite an experience back then.
And you
And
were there a considerable amount of time.
oh yes, it was over 20 years.
Beautiful. And then you came back to the US. And when did Niko show up in your life? I know you still work with horses, with dogs, with cats, but when did this wild bird show up for you?
Well, to backtrack for a second, when I came back, I was given a horse and from my mother, and it was the connection with the horse that brought me to energy work. This is all because of the horse. And so fast forward, the horse is no longer with us, but fast forward, Niko came to me as an injured dove. He's a fledgling, so he was out of his nest, and he was just going about his little young business trying to find food, probably. But anyway, picked up by a dog, and my friend saw it happen, and she was worried that the dove had been injured. So she thought, I'm going to take it to Gillian. She will know what to do. And so that's how he came into my life. He was delivered in a box. And so from there, I realized I don't really know too much about doves or pigeons or anything that would be, where do I start? First of all, I have rehabbed prior to this. I had rehabbed successfully songbirds, but I sensed that there was something different about the dove. And so I looked it up and found out right away that they have an entirely different way of feeding their young and also drinking. So I will tell you that what happens with the dove is that parents will, about, just before the eggs are going to be hatched, they start, they move from sort of, what do you call it? It becomes like a lactation, but it's not from like a mammal. So everything is going to happen in the crop area, which is part of the esophagus, which is like a food pouch. And close to the hatching time, they start lactating in here, and there's a sort of sloughing of cells in this area. It becomes liquid, and it is called crop milk. And this is what the young doves drink. This is their feed. And they regurgitate it, but they regurgitate it and it stays right here. And then they open their mouths wide, and the young baby dove puts his whole head inside the parent's mouth and drinks. And
Wow.
they do this for about 10 days. And it's high in fat, high in protein, antibodies, whatever the dove needs, to survive and grow. And they do grow rapidly at this stage. And then gradually, after about 10 days, they're introduced to seed and grain and maybe some insects, not so much. But so it was a whole different experience. Normally the birds are going to be, taking the food. But in this case, the young bird is going inside the parent's mouth. So I wasn't sure what to do at that point about offering it food. So what I did was I got a little bit of seed and I put it in the palm of my hand and made a little opening and presented it. And that dove went straight in, and actually started eating. So it was already had been introduced to grain and seed. But it recognized that offering. And from that moment, I knew that this bird was going to be fine, and that I knew that we were going to certainly make it back to the wild, is what I was thinking, because that's always my goal, is to get them back to nature.
Wow.
So in the meantime, I guess I put him in a cage, and had him in my office. I was working from home at the time. And so I was there all the day. And I used to open the door of the cage, and he'd come out and sit on the top and just perch there. And soon that evolved to flying over to my computer and then sitting on the top as I'm typing away. Here is this dove watching me. And over time, at this point, he was just really learning to fly. He was not that accurate landing. He was not that, he was clumsy. I would say he's still clumsy. And hadn't learned the finesse of flying yet. And he also wasn't making any sounds. He wasn't cooing or anything. So, but it was during that time, in that office period of about 2 months, maybe going into 3 months, he was given access to the room, and he seemed pretty happy with it all. And it was in that time they did his first molting, and I thought, oh, something's wrong, these feathers are coming out of him, and he looks terrible and scruffy, but no, it's just his first molt. And so even then, he was already coming to me and sitting in my lap, you know. So we were already bonding. We were already finding some feeling of being safe with one another. And so from there, one day, he just sort of seemed to express a desire to go a little bit further into the house. That would be into the kitchen. And I thought, do I really want, I thought, well, why not? Why not just see what happens? So I took the curtain down from the room, keeping, that I put up just specifically to keep him contained. And that really sort of began our learning together. That's when the routines started to develop. He would sit on the window ledge and he'd watch the other birds outside, but express no desire whatsoever to be out there and joining in with them. He was home. It was like being in his nest in the house. And he was perfectly happy in this environment. And as we started to live together every day, he started to explore the rest of the house. One day, I went in and this is in the middle of my work day, I felt the need to take a short nap. So power naps for me were great back then, 20 minutes, and I was good to go for the rest of the day. So I go into the spare room. This is the first time I'd done this with Niko being in the house. Well, he followed me in. He flew up on the bed and he rested himself right along my arm. And we slept together for 20 minutes. And that was the very beginning. And that is a picture on your screen of that happening. And he would sometimes sleep up on the pillow, sometimes in my lap, sometimes at the end of the bed. So it was just that in itself was just so endearing and so, I don't know, connecting, I felt like I was really the parent taking care of this young individual. Let's see. So from there, he started to become a bit more creative, and he started creating games to play, his own games. It didn't really require me so much, but I did provide a cue for him for playtime, which was unbeknownst to me. I mean, he's directing this whole thing. I used to sit on the chest that's in front of the kitchen window, and I would drink my smoothie, and I would sit with my legs long ways. So he would fly to the top of my feet, and that's where he would start his game playing, which first of all, it was hopping from one foot to the other foot, back again and back again. But then, and I knew this was, I thought it was at first just a one-off, but no, he did this repeatedly. He would fly off from my feet. He would go flying across the room, which was not that far, land at a certain place on the wood floor, slide to a halt, and stop just short of hitting the stove. so he was just so chuffed. This was great. So this was exercising takeoff, flight, control, landing, a slide, and a stop. So, and then when he did that, he would turn around and walk back, then hop back up on my feet again and do the same thing again. So here he is teaching himself all of these, skills and techniques, control, and there's thought involved. I mean, to me, there was. So from there, he did start to really learn to fly. He would use the room of the house to the full extent and fly around in a circle. And from there, he learned to fly and then do a turn and go into the next room. And it was quite extraordinary how he strengthened himself and learned all this dexterity in flying and accuracy in landing and takeoff. It was really amazing to watch. So, and that was a
So,
daily thing.
and I know we've talked about how did you keep your house clean?
Mhm.
Because many people who have birds, would be wondering, okay, How did you keep your house clean with him having access after several months to your house?
And I'm so glad you asked that question. I always just tend to throw that in there without being asked because I know that's something that must come up in everybody's mind. Um, so most birds do a squirt poo, and that's liquid and that's very messy. Fortunately, doves do not do this. They create a little small pat, which I ended up calling a cupcake because it was always so well formed. It was never sloppy, and it was firm enough to just literally pick up and dispose of it. And he often would just always do his, like, he would go back to the office to eat and drink, because I always had the feed in there. And he would often go back in there to do his poop. Now, sometimes on the window ledge, I would find it, but again, it didn't have much liquid in it, so it didn't stain anything. It was just this dry, little well-formed. So obviously he was healthy, because I think if he wasn't healthy, it might have been runny. So,
Right.
so anyway, if he was going to sleep next to me, which that was how it developed, that he did start coming all the way to bed at night. I just put a towel, he liked to sleep up here by my head, and I just put a towel out. And the next morning, there'd be like 4 little cupcakes. Just pick them up and dispose of them, and that was that.
Oh, beautiful.
I mean, it might
Beautiful.
be off-putting to some people. To me, I didn't find it terrible. And it was not like I would be finding it all over the place. It was very clean. It was very, you know, purposeful with where he did things, I found. So,
Beautiful. Beautiful. Tell us about this. I'm going to share another picture.
so that is actually in the bedroom. And what he really preferred to do, and I had mentioned just a moment ago that he would sleep in around my shoulder. What he really wanted to do was to sleep on my forehead, right? And so that I took a picture of that because I thought this will probably never happen again. Well, it happened time and time again that he would, but I put my foot down. I have to say, I was not going to have little cupcakes decorating my hair for one thing. And I just thought it's too uncomfortable. I can't move. I can't, I feel like I have to stay still. Absolutely. But I took that picture because that's really what his desire was, is to sleep on my forehead.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So he was
So,
close. I mean, he was sleeping here, he was
wow.
always close. And yeah, it's really, and he would often be on my shoulder, or he might fly to my head. It gave him a chance to do the takeoff and take off and then land up higher, right? Accurately. So all sorts of little exercises that he would do for himself that way. And
Oh, so
yeah,
when you went to sleep at night and he would come up into the bed and be up close to your head, you know, you would sleep 7 or 8 hours. Would he be asleep the whole time?
he would. And here's the thing, I'll tell you two parts to this. Going to bed at night. So as we know, most birds go and roost at dusk and into the early evening. And I don't know why he didn't do it this way for himself, but I would stay up, generally reading at night after chores were done and dishes and all, sit down and read. He would always come and sit down at my feet and not go to bed. Now he might close his eyes, but mainly he wasn't really asleep, and mainly he was awake. As soon as I turned that lamp off, he knew it was where I was going. I was going to go to bed. So the very first thing that he would do, and again, he created this routine. He would drink his water in the other room, except at night before he went to bed. Then he would walk over to the kitchen sink and ask to have a little cup of water before going to bed. And we did this every single night. Once he established it, once he did it once, we did it every night. And then once he had his water, then he would hop off the counter or the sink. He wouldn't fly. Now they walk a lot. pigeons, doves. So he would walk all the way through the house, down the hallway to the bedroom. And here I am following him. Like I'm going to the bedroom with Niko. And when he got to the bedroom doorway, he would fly to the bed. Now, in the morning, and then we'd sleep all the night, yes. But I would always get up early. I used to get up at 5:30, way too early for Niko. He would stay in bed for at least another hour until it was beginning to be daylight. And I'd be in the kitchen already making tea and making breakfast and getting ready to go to work and so forth. And here he comes, walking in like an hour later. Morning, right? And generally fly to the window ledge or fly to my shoulder.
Mm.
So yeah, he didn't want to get up so early, but he was prepared to stay up later than what he would probably normally do.
I just love this picture of him
He would
just,
do this all the time.
oh,
He loved it. And honestly, I can say in the 14 months, put everyone's mind at ease, I never had any cupcakes in my hair, ever, ever, never. On my shoulder, never. It was almost like he was being super respectful. There was never an accident, put it that
wow.
way. So
Wow.
yeah,
That's amazing. So, talk to us about the the feelings of connection. You had taken in Niko. Um, you had taken in this injured bird, and you had done all this research to find out what small birds, doves need, and you had maybe expected that at a certain point in time, he would be ready to go back into the wild. But then he started really connecting with you, developing these bonds with you, and creating these games. And so talk to us about what happened and what was the time frame?
well, I do believe that the last 6 months that he was living here were the most intimate and the most sacred and the most magical of all of our months together. Um, and I was a bit distracted with taking him outside. There was moments when the door was open and he never flew out. He just sit there and look, and he wasn't at all interested, it seemed. Um, so here's what happens to a wild bird that you're rehabbing that may be in a cage. This is my experience, is that as they're growing up as a young bird, as a young fledgling, um, they don't really see the bars of the cage. And I would always check that, because if I were, for example, to take a bird out and put it on the tree limb, might have been premature and they would freak out and they wanted to be back in the cage, right? So that was that security and that safety of home for them. And then all of a sudden in their development, they suddenly see the bars of the cage. And then it becomes like, yes, it's time. So that's sort of what happened with Niko, if you like. If you consider that this is a massive cage, right? He's in the house. One day I heard him cooing, but I wasn't sure where he was. I knew he was at the back of the house. So I found him in the back of the house. And there he was perched on top of the ceiling fan. It was not going around. It was just, yeah, it was still. But anyway, at that moment, like he's as high up as he can get to the ceiling. Like there's that much space between fan blade, I guess, and ceiling. And at that moment, it was like I realized, and I said to him, I see that you have reached as high as you can ever fly with me living here. And I knew it was time. I knew it was time to start preparing him in my mind to go outside and find feed and find water. And I really think that communication was very clear. That imagery was very clear for him as well. So he'd reached this sort of youthful maturity, right? We've gone through these iterations of like parent child and then buddy, sister, buddy, playmate. And then it moved a little bit deeper than that. It became like partner, right? Loving partner, communicating part, it was. And so now we're at a phase where it's time for him to find his true partner. And it was so clear. So with that in mind, that I'm going to start figuring out how to get him prepared to be outside, because this is August. So it's hot, it's dry. He'd never been outside except for when he was in the nest originally. Well, as it happens, as I say, the imagery must have been very clear, because I walked up to the front of the house. I had a big massage table that I was wanting to put outside to the car. And I had the door open, this heavy thing. And in that moment, I hadn't realized Niko had followed me. And for the first time ever, here he was. I could see it coming. He was making a flight to go straight out. I mean, there was going to be no stopping this happening. And that is when he left. He flew to nature.
Mm.
He was ready. I felt he wasn't ready, because I thought, how is he going to survive? How's he going to find food? How's he going to find water? It's so dry this month. August is intense with the heat, summer
Right.
heat. So all I could do is pray and hold it in my heart that he would find community. He would find dove community. And I just trust and believe that he had found this after a while. I don't know for how long, but I was driving. I went looking for him. She went looking for him, and there was a dove that was down the road, that was in the middle of the road, and I really believe it was Niko, but he flew off, of course. And then in part of that tour, I came across another field that had power lines running across it. And I can tell you, Melody, I've never seen so many mourning doves together on, I mean, I don't know how big this community was. Maybe it was more than one community, but there seemed to be just dozens upon dozens upon dozens upon dozens. And I thought, okay, let's believe, let's hold that he's found these other doves, and they would help him. So
Beautiful.
yeah. And I
Wow.
still look for him. I do. Yesterday I was talking to friends, and I looked out the window, and a mourning dove, a young one, the same age as he was when he first came to me, landed just outside my window. And I don't know what his purpose was, really, but I got a message. And the message was, continue to look beyond what you can see. And I just thought that's very apropos to all of my experience with Niko. And it's interesting that I should have a message like that from a member of the dove community just yesterday.
Right. So just like, I'm so moved.
Well, I'm very teary-eyed myself.
Just like you sharing the story of your interspecies relationship, interspecies connection, communication with Niko, this dove who was injured and brought to you and grew up in your care. And then, whether or not obviously you did not feel like you were finished preparing him to be in the wild, but he felt complete. And maybe there, just as you are sharing this story with us, maybe the dove community or communities that welcomed him, he's sharing his story with them.
I know what you're going to say. You won't believe this, but there's this human, right? And she gets it, right? You wouldn't believe it's a person, it's a human. But Yes, I lived there 14 months. I can tell you it worked. I can just hear him saying that to his dove friends, right?
Right. Right.
Really.
Because your ability to research what do young doves need, and then to create, the way in which he was able to understand you and what you were offering, and then you were able to understand, wow, he's hopping from one foot to the next, and then he's doing all of these things. It's a game that's teaching him. There's a way in which your attention went beyond what you were just looking at. Your intention went to, what are his motives? What are his, what there's a respect for his intelligence and his desires that was in you, possibly from working with the animals, the horses, the dogs, the cats, and possibly just because of your intuition. You have a strong relationship with your intuition and a trust of your own intuition. So it's easy when you trust your intuition to trust what is coming from this other species.
This is correct. And it is just trusting because it can come in the sense of a feeling. It can come in the sense of an image or even words. And the feeling is like a gut feeling. It comes really quickly. And when it comes really fast, I have no doubts that this is something that I've received from the animal. Um, it does take listening rather than talking to them. It takes the listening. And so that's an opening up of just creating this inner space that tends to sort of fill the room. It's hard to describe it, but it's in that space that that's when the communication really seems to occur.
And this happened when he gave you his name, I think.
Yes, and very simply, I wrote it down as Nico. The name came up from him, and I wrote it down as Nico, and I was quickly told, no, it's Kniko. And I thought about it, and what I asked about it, I said, why does that make a difference? And he says, it's the masculinity of the K that is important. I carry that. And that's what was the message. So it stayed as Niko and Iko. So
How beautiful. How absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for
well,
sharing this story, for sharing your connection, your relationship with this beautiful male mourning dove, and this interspecies communication. And talk to us a little bit about I know you do other work. I know you work with humans as well as animals, but if someone had a pet or an animal they were fostering or tending, and they were concerned and didn't have quite yet the connection that you seem to be able to have, what do you recommend?
reach out to me. Let me have a talk with their animal. And of course, I'm always going to ask permission first of the animal, right? So they don't just suddenly get hit with a stranger coming into their sense of whatever, like what, is this? So, um, yes, because animals have emotions and feelings and thoughts, and behaviors change sometimes out of the blue. Why is that? Well, the animal can throw some insight into this question, as a solution. And I think I really started to do it with horses. You know, the horses were the first ones that brought the energy connection to me. And you know, I had a mare who would I could put out the thought to her, and then she would do it. It was kind of extraordinary.
Wow.
And I won't go into that now, but yes, I'd be more than happy to help. I would be able to do it either remotely or locally. You know, I live in Athens, Georgia, um, just outside of Athens. And so I'd be more than happy to just be able to check in with the animal and ascertain what seems to be going on in the situation. You know, do they feel intimidated because someone else has joined the family, you know, or do they feel they don't have a job to do at home in the family unit? These things are really important for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Gillian. I am so grateful, and I will definitely share how people can get in touch with you. And I just really appreciate you bringing the story of Niko and how your relationship evolved to the community. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome, but thank you, Melody, for giving me the chance, the opportunity. It's lovely. And you know, I keep thinking about bits and more pieces I would like to share, but another time perhaps. And yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
yeah. But so I thank you so much. This has been a great pleasure for me. And
Wonderful. Thank you.